So something I be noticing on TikTok, and I've kind of touched on this in like certain community posts and passively in videos as well. But a phenomenon I notice a lot on TikTok, and I kind of notice it other places too, but I think that shows up for different reasons. But kind of this phenomenon of certain black and mixed, biracial, whatever, women that grew up mainly, and we know that the default in the United States is like white or Asian communities. So, stereotypically maybe the suburbs, XYZ, but just in a white area or whatever. And then they're talking about like light skin privilege, like colorism, things like that. And I want to make it very clear. I just made that whole round of videos defending Paris Mwambe for being a suburban girly and talking about her experience. So I think that there's validity in talking about colorism in suburban and white spaces as well, because I do think that white people can be colorist. I do think that white people do see the differences in skin tones. I don't think white people are definitely not dumb. I've had this conversation with people in my family. White people can tell who's light skin and dark skin. You know what I mean? So I think that there's validity, but I do think that it's interesting how these same types of people, they'll talk about the color-based, like anti-black experiences they had like with white people, but then they'll tell other light-skinned people like, oh, there's colorism in the black community. And I have a reason why I think that this is happening. I'm going to talk about this in the next clip. But I do feel like the intake process of different experiences impacts how you see things. So if a lot of your racial experiences, at least negative ones, were with white people and maybe we're not focused on color, I do think that you will perceive different types of instances of racial discrimination or color discrimination as different, because when it's coming from a whole non-black group, it does kind of hit different. As where if you come into the black community or start being in community with other black men and women as an adult, you're intaking those experiences a little different. So if you're a light skin or mixed person, that might be the first time in your life you grew up around a white person where you're not the darkest person there, or you're not the only person that looks different. And I'm sure it's different for like dark-skinned women as well who grew up in the suburbs. But I do think that impacts, as opposed to somebody like me. I grew up in a middle-class black area. Central Harlem is different, varying socioeconomic instances. I didn't grow up around straight poor black people, but I did have a certain experience because I grew up in a black and Hispanic area. I grew up mainly in community with people in the African diaspora. So I didn't have experiences with white people like that growing up. So my perception, even though there's a class intersection to that as well, is going to be different based on who you were socialized in community with.